The great dome of the Galactic Council chamber stretched above like a crystal sky. Light from 47 different stars filtered through its transparent walls, casting rainbow patterns across the circular floor below. In the center of this magnificent space sat a ring of chairs, each one carved from materials sacred to the species it represented. Ambassador walked slowly around the circle, her 4 arms clasped behind her back. Her pale blue skin rippled with the patterns that showed deep thought among her people. She stopped at one particular chair and stared at it with growing frustration. The chair was made of dark wood, polished smooth by centuries of careful maintenance. It had been crafted by the finest artisans on station, using timber shipped from Earth itself. The humans had sent the wood 300 years ago, along with detailed specifications for the chair's construction. Then they had never sent anyone to sit in it. "Still bothering you, Ambassador?" Turned to see Admiral approaching. The warrior's gray skin looked like living stone, and his red eyes glowed with controlled anger. He wore the dark uniform of the Confederation Defense Force, its metals catching the starlight. 3 centuries, Admiral said, gesturing at the empty chair. 300 years since first contact. Every other species joined within 50 years of developing space travel. But the humans ignore us, finished. His voice was like grinding rocks. They build their colonies wherever they want. They mine asteroids in protected systems. They refuse to answer our communications. It's chaos. Picked up a data tablet from her seat and scrolled through the latest reports. Look at these numbers, Admiral. The humans now have settlements in 12 star systems. Their population exceeds 2 billion across all their worlds. They've developed faster-than-light travel that our scientists claim is impossible, yet they've never once asked to join us. Other ambassadors were arriving for the daily session. The reptilians slithered to their seats, while the crystalline floated above theirs. The insect-like hive queens clicked and buzzed as they settled into their specially designed perches. All 46 member species were represented. All except one. "The chair mocks us," Admiral said quietly. "Every day we meet, every decision we make, and there it sits, empty, ignored." Council leader called the session to order. The ancient being's energy form flickered as it spoke. "Today, we address the quarterly report on primitive species advancement. Ambassador." Stood and activated her holographic display. Images of human ships, stations, and colonies appeared in the chamber's center. "The species known as humanity continues to confound our expectations," she began. Murmurs rose from the assembled representatives. Everyone knew about the human problem. They have developed quantum-fold technology that allows ships to travel between star systems in days rather than months. Our best engineers insist this violates the fundamental laws of physics, yet human cargo vessels use it routinely. More concerned whispers filled the chamber. Their asteroid mining operations produce rare metals at rates that should be impossible without massive environmental damage. Our observers report their systems actually become more stable and life-supporting over time, not less. Ambassador of the hegemony raised one of his tentacles. "Have they responded to our latest invitation?" "The same as always," replied. "Polite acknowledgement, thanks for the offer, not interested at this time." "It's an insult," Admiral said, standing without permission. "We are the galactic community. We represent order, law, and civilization. How can they simply ignore us?" Council leader pulsed with calming colors. "Admiral, please remember proper procedure." But other voices were joining in. The debate that happened every quarter was starting again. "They're dangerous," insisted Ambassador Click 7 of the Hive. "Uncontrolled expansion threatens established territories." "Perhaps they're simply not ready," suggested the soft voice of the plant-like representative. "Some species take longer to mature." Looked at her data again. "With respect, Ambassador, the humans have been spacefaring for over 400 years. They're not immature. They're choosing to ignore us. The chamber erupted in clicking, buzzing, and various alien sounds of distress. The humans were the great mystery of galactic politics. Every model, every prediction about species development said they should have joined the Confederation by now. Advanced species always did. It was the natural order. "What about forced contact?" Admiral asked. The chamber fell silent. "We have protocols for dealing with dangerous primitive species. The humans refuse to acknowledge galactic law. They operate outside our trade agreements. They make first contact with new species without proper authorization." "The humans have never shown aggression," pointed out Ambassador. "Every report indicates they're peaceful if independent." "Independence is chaos," replied. "What happens when other species see the human example? What if they decide they don't need the Confederation either?" This was the real fear, new. For 3 centuries, the Galactic Confederation had maintained peace through order. Every species had its place, its role, its proper behavior. The humans threatened that by proving you could thrive outside the system. Already there were troubling signs. They had withdrawn their application for membership last year. 2 other species had begun asking difficult questions about Confederation benefits versus obligations. The carefully maintained order was starting to crack. "I propose we send an official delegation," said finally. "A formal diplomatic mission with full authority will travel to their home system and demand answers." The chamber buzzed with discussion. Such missions were rare and serious. They were usually the last step before economic sanctions or military action. Council leader considered carefully. "What would be our position, Ambassador?" "Simple," replied, looking at the empty wooden chair. "Join us or face the consequences. The era of human independence ends now." The vote was unanimous. For the first time in 300 years, the Galactic Confederation would force humanity to respond. One way or another, that empty chair would finally be filled. Or destroyed. As the session ended and the ambassadors filed out, Remain behind. She walked over to the human chair and ran one of her hands along its smooth surface. The wood felt warm under her touch, as if it remembered the living tree it had once been. Soon, she thought, this mystery would be solved. The humans would take their proper place in galactic civilization, just like every other species had done. She had no idea how wrong she was. Dr. Sarah wiped the dust from her hands and stepped back to admire her work. The ancient stone doorway was finally clear, revealing symbols that hadn't seen light for thousands of years. Around her, the dig site buzzed with quiet activity as her team documented every detail. "Sarah, you need to see this," called from deeper in the ruins. Her archaeological partner was crouched beside what looked like a control panel, his scanner beeping excitedly. Sarah walked through the newly opened passage, her boots clicking on the smooth floor. The ruins stretched out before them like an underground city, all clean lines and flowing curves. The builders had been gone but their technology still hummed with power. "The energy readings are off the charts," said, not looking up from his scanner. "This isn't just advanced tech. This is stuff that makes our quantum drives look like steam engines." "Any idea what it does?" Sarah asked, running her hand along the wall. The surface was warm and seemed to pulse with inner light. "Arya thinks it's some kind of data storage, possibly a library or historical archive." Arya was their AI partner, a sophisticated intelligence that had been working with the DIG team for 3 years. Unlike the Galactic Confederation's strict rules about artificial intelligence, humans had long ago learned to work alongside AI as equals. Arya was as much a member of the team as any human. "Good morning, Doctor," Arya's voice came through the comm system. "I've been analyzing the symbol patterns. I believe this facility was built by the predecessors approximately 12,000 years ago." Sarah smiled. "Any idea why they left it behind?" "Unknown, but I'm detecting similar energy signatures in 17 other locations across this continent. This may have been part of a planet-wide network. Stood up and stretched. The Confederation declared this whole system off-limits, didn't they? Some kind of environmental protection thing. Sarah nodded. They've been studying the predecessor sites for over 200 years, mostly filing reports about why they can't actually explore them yet. This was typical of the Galactic Confederation's approach to everything. Committees, studies, impact assessments, more committees. By the time they finished deciding whether it was safe to investigate something, the opportunity had usually passed. Humans took a different approach. When they detected the predecessor ruins on New Kyoto, they'd simply come here and started exploring. Carefully, respectfully, but without waiting for permission from a government that had never shown any interest in their welfare. "Arya, what's the status on the environmental sensors?" Sarah asked. "All readings remain within normal parameters, Doctor. In fact, ecosystem stability has improved by 12% since we began operations here. The predecessor technology seems to have a beneficial effect on the local environment." That was another thing humans had learned. Predecessor ruins didn't damage their surroundings. They enhanced them. But the Confederation's rigid protocols prevented them from discovering this because they never got close enough to actually investigate. Sarah's personal communicator chimed. She glanced at the display and saw a message from Captain Park of the transport ship Wanderer. Was one of New Kyoto's coordinators, helping manage the colony's external relations. "Sarah, we've got visitors incoming. Big ones. Confederation fleet heading for Sol system with what looks like diplomatic flags. Thought you'd want to know." Sarah frowned. The Confederation rarely sent ships to human space. When they did, it was usually to deliver formal complaints about human activities in their territory. These complaints were always polite but firm, and humans always responded politely but ignored them. "We might have company soon," she said. "The Confederation is making noise again." "Let me guess," replied, sealing another sample container. "They're upset that we're actually learning things about the predecessors, while they're still forming committees to decide whether learning things is appropriate." "Probably something like that." Sarah walked to the surface and looked up at New Kyoto's purple sky. The planet was beautiful, with crystal formations that sang in the wind and forests of silver-leaf trees. The human settlement blended into the landscape like it had grown there naturally. This was how humans built things. They worked with the environment instead of fighting it. They adapted their technology to fit local conditions instead of forcing planets to fit their technology. It was more difficult than the Confederation's standard approach, but the results were better. Her communicator chimed again. This time it was a general message being broadcast to all human settlements. "This is Director Elizabeth Santos of Earth Central Coordination," the message began. "We've received word that the Galactic Confederation is sending a diplomatic mission to Sol system. They're requesting formal negotiations about humanity's status in galactic affairs." Sarah wasn't surprised. Every few decades, the Confederation tried this approach. They would send official representatives to explain why humans needed to join their organization. Humans would listen politely, thank them for their concern, and explain that they were doing fine on their own. "All colonial coordinators and department heads are invited to participate in the discussion," the message continued. "We'll be holding an open forum in 18 hours. As always, participation is voluntary and all opinions are welcome." That was the human way. No orders, no commands, just invitations and opportunities. People participated because they wanted to, not because they were forced to. Somehow, this approach worked better than the Confederation's rigid hierarchies. Sarah smiled and headed back into the ruins. Whatever the Confederation wanted, the colony coordinators would handle it. She had more important work to do. Deep in the predecessor archive, Arya had made another discovery. "Doctor, I'm detecting a reference to something called the Great Departure. It appears the predecessors didn't die out. They left." "Left for where?" Sarah asked. "Unknown, but they left these archives behind as gifts for whoever came after them. They wanted their knowledge to be found and used." Sarah felt a chill of excitement. The predecessors hadn't just vanished. They'd graduated to something beyond physical existence, leaving their wisdom as an inheritance for younger species. It was the most important archaeological discovery in galactic history. The Confederation would want to study it for centuries before doing anything. They would form committees, write reports, and debate the implications until the opportunity was lost. Humans would learn from it and build something better. As Sarah worked to unlock the predecessor archives, she thought about the difference between the human approach and the Confederation's way of doing things. The aliens had created a system based on control, hierarchy, and cautious progress. Humans had built something based on cooperation, innovation, and bold action. Both systems worked, but only one of them was truly alive. "Arya, how long before we can access the main data core?" "Approximately 6 hours, Doctor. Shall I notify the other colonies about our discovery?" "Yes, but keep it on the human networks for now. Let's understand what we found before we share it with the galaxy." Outside, New Kyoto's twin moons were rising, casting silver light across the ruins. Somewhere in space, the Confederation fleet was approaching Sol's system with demands and ultimatums. But here in the predecessor archive, Sarah was unlocking secrets that could change everything. The humans didn't need the galaxy's approval. They never had. They just needed the freedom to be themselves. Ambassador stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council, her 4 arms trembling with barely controlled emotion. The holographic display behind her showed a star map of the local galactic region, but 3 systems that should have shown Confederation colors now glowed an ominous neutral gray. "The collective has formally withdrawn from the Confederation," she announced to the shocked assembly. "Their final transmission was brief and, I must say, disturbing." She activated the recording. A voice filled the chamber, speaking in the clipped tones of the language. The translation appeared as text in the air above them. "To the Galactic Confederation Council, after careful consideration, we have decided to withdraw from membership. We have observed that the species known as humanity has prospered for centuries without your guidance. If they can thrive independently, perhaps we can as well. We thank you for your past assistance, but will chart our own course from this day forward." The chamber erupted in noise. 43 different species all spoke at once, their various forms of communication creating a chaos of sound and color. Only the human chair sat silent in the circle, its empty presence somehow more noticeable than all the alien voices combined. "Order," Council leader pulsed with authority, and the noise gradually died down. "Ambassador, continue your report." "It gets worse," said grimly. "The Trading Federation has submitted a formal inquiry about the benefits of Confederation membership versus independent operation. The uprising on 3 worlds has adopted what they call human-style governance, voluntary cooperation instead of imperial rule. Even some of our own member species are asking questions." Admiral's stone-like features were darker than usual. "How many ships does this withdrawal represent?" "Approximately 400 vessels, including 12 heavy cruisers and their mobile shipyard platforms. They've also closed their borders to Confederation traffic." The implications were staggering. They had been model members for over a century, contributing ships, resources, and expertise to the galactic community. Now they were gone, taking their considerable military and economic power with them. "This is a direct result of human influence," Admiral declared, standing without permission again. "They've poisoned the minds of other species with their chaotic philosophy." Admiral, Council Leader warned but continued. For 300 years, we've watched the humans ignore every principle of galactic civilization. Now other species think they can do the same. This chaos will destroy everything we've built. Ambassador of the Crystalline Accord chimed in harmonious tones. Perhaps we should examine why species find the human model attractive. What are we doing that drives them away? We're not doing anything wrong, snapped Ambassador Click 7 of the Hive. We provide order, stability, and protection. The humans offer nothing but dangerous independence. Looked around the chamber and saw fear in too many eyes. The Confederation had ruled galactic affairs for over 1,000 years, but its authority had always depended on the belief that membership was necessary for survival and prosperity. The humans had shattered that belief simply by existing. I propose immediate action, she said finally. We send a full diplomatic mission to Sol System with a clear ultimatum. Join us or face economic and military consequences. What kind of consequences? Asked the plant-like ambassador. Admiral answered before could respond. Complete economic blockade. Seizure of human assets in Confederation space. If they resist, we're prepared to use military force to bring them into compliance. The chamber fell silent. Military action against a spacefaring species was almost unheard of in modern galactic politics. The last time it had been used was over 2 centuries ago, against a race of aggressive raiders who had refused all diplomatic contact. But the humans weren't raiders. They were peaceful, innovative, and apparently very successful at managing their own affairs. Military action against them would be difficult to justify to the galactic community. Are we certain this is wise? Ambassador asked. The humans have never shown aggression toward anyone. They don't need to, Admiral replied. Their very existence is aggression against galactic order. Every day they remain independent, other species wonder why they need us at all. This was the heart of the problem, new. The Confederation's power came from being necessary. If species could thrive without them, the whole system would collapse. The humans had to be brought into line, not because they were dangerous, but because they proved independence was possible. What do we know about human military capabilities? Asked Ambassador. Brought up another display. Very little concrete information. They don't maintain standing military forces in the traditional sense. Instead, they rely on armed civilian vessels and rapid response coordination networks. Civilian vessels, scoffed. How can civilians defend against a proper battle fleet? That's what concerns me, Admiral. Human, civilian ships often carry military-grade equipment. Their quantum-fold drives allow them to concentrate forces faster than our strategic models predict. And their technology, she paused, choosing her words carefully, their technology frequently violates our understanding of physical laws. The chamber stirred uneasily. Everyone had heard rumors about impossible human achievements, but the full scope was carefully kept from public knowledge. Regardless of their capabilities, said firmly, they can't match a full Confederation fleet. I recommend we assemble a force of 500 ships, including our dreadnoughts. 500 ships, Ambassador chimed in alarm. That's larger than most invasion fleets. We're not invading, explained. We're making a demonstration. The humans need to understand that independence has consequences. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The human problem had grown too large to ignore. Other species were watching, waiting to see if the Confederation would enforce its authority or admit that galactic civilization was optional. Finally, Council Leader called for a formal vote. All in favor of sending a diplomatic mission with military support to demand human compliance with galactic law. 42 of 43 member species voted in favor. Only the abstained, their plant representative swaying uncertainly in what might have been distress. Motion carried, announced. Admiral, you will command the military escort. Ambassador will lead diplomatic negotiations. You have full authority to enforce Confederation law by any means necessary. As the session ended, gathered her materials and prepared to leave. But she found herself looking once more at the empty human chair. Soon, she told herself, a human representative would sit there. They would take their proper place in galactic civilization and stop undermining everything the Confederation had built. Admiral approached her as the chamber emptied. How long before we can depart? 3 weeks to assemble the fleet and prepare diplomatic materials, replied. The humans will have time to consider their position. And if they refuse? Looked at the empty chair one final time. Then we'll do what we should have done centuries ago. We'll make the decision for them. Neither of them noticed the small recording device hidden in the human chair's wooden armrest. It had been placed there by human intelligence operatives over a century ago and had been faithfully transmitting Confederation discussions to Earth ever since. In Sol's system, Director Elizabeth Santos read the transcript with a mixture of sadness and resignation. The Confederation was finally going to force the issue. 300 years of peaceful independence were about to end, one way or another. She activated her communication system and began sending messages to human colonies across a dozen star systems. It was time to remind the galaxy why humanity had never needed anyone's permission to exist. The empty chair had been a symbol of invitation rejected. Soon it would become a symbol of something far more dangerous. The moment when a peaceful species decided they'd been pushed too far. The Confederation fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Sol's system like a storm front approaching a peaceful shore. 500 ships of various sizes and designs spread across space in perfect military formation, their hulls gleaming under the distant light of Earth's sun. Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the massive dreadnought Galactic Unity, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. Never in the history of the Confederation had such a force been assembled for a diplomatic mission. The humans would have no choice but to see reason. Admiral, his communications officer reported, we're receiving a transmission from a human vessel. Looked at the display and frowned. According to sensors, a single small ship was approaching their position. It was sleek and elegant, but tiny compared to even his smallest escort vessels. Put them through, he ordered. The main screen lit up with the image of a young woman in a simple blue uniform. She had dark hair and friendly eyes, and she was smiling as if she was greeting old friends at a social gathering. Welcome to Sol System, she said cheerfully. I'm Captain Park of the vessel Wanderer. We've been tracking your approach for the past week and wanted to make sure you have proper navigation data for your safety. Was taken aback by the casual tone. This was a military fleet carrying ultimatums, not a tourist group needing directions. This is Admiral of the Confederation Defense Force, he replied formally. I demand to speak with your planetary government immediately. Captain Park tilted her head slightly. Well, Earth doesn't really have a planetary government in the traditional sense, Admiral, but I can arrange meetings with whoever you need to talk to. What specific issues would you like to discuss? We're here to deliver formal demands from the Galactic Council, said, his voice rising. Your species will comply with galactic law or face the consequences. I see, said, her smile fading slightly. That sounds pretty serious. Give me about 6 hours and I can have our coordination team assembled for an emergency session. Will that work for you? Was speechless. He was commanding a massive battle fleet, delivering ultimatums that could determine the fate of human civilization, and this woman was treating it like a scheduling problem. Ambassador stepped forward. Captain Park, we represent 43 starfaring civilizations with a combined population of over 1 trillion beings. This is not a matter for casual discussion. Oh, I understand completely, replied. That's why I'm calling it an emergency session. Normally, we'd need at least a week to get everyone together, but given the circumstances, 6 hours should be enough. Everyone asked. The people you'll need to talk to. Colony coordinators, trade representatives, defense coordinators, that sort of thing. Dr. Santos from Earth Central will be joining us, along with representatives from Mars, the Belt, and our outer system settlements. Realized something that made his blood run cold. The human ship had approached their fleet without any apparent concern for the massive firepower arrayed against it. Either they were completely naive about military matters, or they knew something he didn't. "Captain," he said carefully, "are you aware that this fleet carries enough firepower to devastate entire planets?" Smile returned. "Of course, Admiral. We've been monitoring your ship since you left Confederation space. Impressive vessels, by the way. Your engineers do excellent work." "Then you understand the situation." "Absolutely. You're here to demand that humanity join the Galactic Confederation and submit to alien authority. We're here to politely decline and hope you'll respect our decision. Pretty straightforward, really." The casual dismissal of his massive fleet's threat left struggling for words. How could they be so unconcerned? Over the next several hours, as the Confederation fleet took position around Sol's outer planets, began to get his answer. Human ships were everywhere, but they didn't move like any military he'd ever encountered. Small civilian transports went about their business, carrying passengers and cargo between planets, as if 500 alien warships weren't watching their every move. Mining vessels continued their work in the asteroid belt. Research ships conducted experiments in the outer system. None of them seemed concerned about the massive threat hanging over their civilization. "Admiral," his sensor officer called out, "I'm detecting some unusual readings." "What kind of readings?" "Ships, sir, but they're not showing up on long-range sensors, they just appear." Looked at his tactical display and felt his certainty begin to crack. Dozens of human vessels were materializing around his fleet, not by dropping out of hyperspace, but by simply existing where they hadn't existed before. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir. The quantum fold signatures don't match any technology in our databases." Within 2 hours, the human ships outnumbered his fleet 3-1. They weren't threatening or aggressive. They just appeared, maintained position, and continued whatever they'd been doing before. But their presence was unmistakable. "Time for the meeting, Admiral," Captain Park's voice came over the communication system. "Dr. Santos is ready to receive you." The meeting took place on a space station orbiting Earth's moon, and took a shuttle to the human facility, accompanied by a small guard detail. The station was beautiful in a way that made no sense, organic curves and flowing lines that seemed to grow rather than being built. Dr. Elizabeth Santos met them at the airlock. She was an older woman with gray hair and calm eyes, wearing simple civilian clothes that somehow made her seem more authoritative than any military uniform. "Welcome to Luna Station," she said warmly. "Please come in, we have refreshments prepared." They were led to a conference room with a view of Earth hanging in the beyond. The planet looked peaceful and blue, with city lights twinkling on the night side. Found it hard to believe this quiet world was the center of a civilization that had galactic authority for 3 centuries. "Dr. Santos," Ambassador began formally, "we come bearing the unanimous decision of the Galactic Council. Humanity must join the Confederation and accept galactic law. The era of independent operation ends now." Dr. Santos nodded thoughtfully. "I appreciate you making the journey to deliver that message personally, Ambassador. I'm afraid our answer remains the same as it's been for the past 300 years. We respectfully decline." "You don't understand," interrupted. "This isn't a request. We have 500 ships in your system, economic blockade, military action, complete isolation from galactic civilization. Those are the consequences of refusal. I understand your position completely, Admiral, Dr. Santos replied calmly. I hope you'll understand ours. Which is? We've built something here, something that works for us. We're not interested in trading our independence for the privilege of following someone else's rules. Leaned forward aggressively. You have no choice. Submit to Confederation authority or be forced to comply. Dr. Santos smiled sadly. Admiral, with all due respect, you're not in a position to force anything. That's when's personal communicator began buzzing with emergency signals from his fleet. His ships were reporting the impossible thousands of human vessels had appeared throughout Sol system. Not just ships, but weapons platforms, defense stations, and installations that his sensors couldn't even identify. How, he whispered. Quantum fold technology, Dr. Santos explained. We can move resources instantly across vast distances. Every human settlement, every colony, every facility can be anywhere it needs to be within minutes. Captain Park's voice came over the station's communication system. Admiral, your ship commanders are requesting instructions. Our vessels are maintaining safe distances, but any aggressive action will result in immediate defensive responses. Looked out at Earth and realized the truth. His massive battle fleet was surrounded, outnumbered, and completely outmaneuvered by a civilization that had never wanted anything from the galaxy except to be left alone. What happens now? Ambassador asked quietly. That's up to you, Dr. Santos replied. You can leave peacefully and we'll continue being the friendly neighbors we've always been. Or you can try to force the issue and discover why humanity has never needed anyone's protection. For the first time in his military career, Admiral was facing an enemy he couldn't intimidate or defeat. The humans had made their position clear. Now he had to decide whether the Confederation was ready for a war it couldn't win. Admiral stared at his tactical display for a long moment, watching the impossible numbers multiply across his screen. 3,000 human vessels now surrounded his fleet, appearing and disappearing through space-folding technology that his best scientists insisted couldn't exist. His communications officer looked up with barely concealed panic. Admiral, the Nebula's Edge are requesting permission to surrender. Their crews are concerned about the tactical situation. Closed his eyes. 500 ships of the Confederation's finest battle fleet, outmaneuvered and surrounded by civilians using impossible technology. The worst part was that the humans weren't even being threatening. They were just there. Admiral, came Captain Park's voice over the communication system, Dr. Santos has asked me to extend an invitation. Any of your personnel who would like to remain in Sol system as cultural exchange participants are welcome to do so. We have universities, research facilities, and opportunities that might interest them. It was the final insult. Offer sanctuary to his own people, as if they were refugees instead of representatives of galactic authority. Sir, his communications officer said quietly, we're receiving formal requests from a lot of ships. How many? 147 vessels, sir. Approximately 30% of the fleet. Felt the last of his certainty crumble. His own people wanted to abandon their mission and stay with the humans. The implications were staggering. Ambassador walked onto the bridge, her blue skin pale with shock. Admiral, I've been monitoring communications across the fleet. Scientists, engineers, even some military officers, they're all fascinated by human society. They're abandoning their duty, said bitterly. Are they, or are they recognizing something we've been too proud to see? Before could respond, Dr. Santos appeared on the main screen. She looked tired but determined. Admiral, we understand this is a difficult situation. No one wants conflict. But we need to be clear about something. We will defend our independence. Not out of aggression or arrogance, but because we've built something worth protecting. What happens to galactic order? Asked. What happens to civilization if every species decides they don't need the Confederation? Maybe, Dr. Santos said gently, a civilization that people want to leave isn't worth preserving. The words hit like a physical blow. He'd spent his entire life believing in the Confederation's mission, in the necessity of galactic order and central authority. The idea that it might all be unnecessary was almost incomprehensible. We're withdrawing, he announced finally. This mission is terminated. 3 weeks later, Ambassador stood in the Confederation Council chamber, delivering her final report. The human chair sat empty as always, but now it was joined by 7 others. The withdrawal had been followed by the colonies and 4 other species who had decided independence looked better than membership. The human model is spreading, she told the reduced assembly. Voluntary cooperation instead of enforced hierarchy, innovation instead of regulated progress, individual choice instead of collective mandate. Council leader pulsed with dim colors. The ancient being seemed to have aged centuries in just a few weeks. What are our options? We can adapt or become irrelevant, said bluntly. The galaxy is changing. We can change with it or watch from the sidelines. After the session, walked slowly around the chamber, looking at all the empty chairs. She'd submitted her resignation that morning, along with a request to serve as an independent consul between human space and what remained of the Confederation. Her personal communicator chimed with a message from Dr. Santos. Ambassador, we've reviewed your request to establish a cultural exchange program. We'd be honored to host you at our diplomatic facility on Luna Station. Smiled for the first time in months. Maybe it was time to see what humanity had built instead of trying to force them into someone else's vision. 6 months later, Dr. Sarah stood in the predecessor archive on New Kyoto, but she wasn't alone. Archaeologists worked alongside her human team, their different perspectives providing new insights into the ancient ruins. Even a few military specialists had joined the dig, fascinated by predecessor defensive technologies. Arya, what's our status on the translation project? Sarah asked. Excellent progress, Doctor. With input from 7 different species, we've decoded approximately 40% of the predecessor database. The cooperation between different analytical approaches has been remarkably effective. Through the ruins, Sarah could hear laughter echoing from the main excavation site. A young researcher had made a joke about human eating habits, and everyone was sharing stories about their different cultures. It was the kind of easy collaboration that the Confederation's rigid protocols had never allowed. Doctor called from deeper in the archive, you need to see this. Sarah walked through the stone corridors to find standing before a massive holographic display. The projection showed a star map of the galaxy, but not as it existed now. This was the galaxy as the predecessors had known it, a vast network of interconnected civilizations sharing knowledge and resources without central authority. They never had a galactic government, breathed. No confederation, no empire, no central control, just voluntary cooperation between independent cultures. And they achieved things that we're only beginning to understand, added Arya. Perhaps the human approach isn't unique. Perhaps it's what happens when civilizations mature enough to stop needing external authority. Sarah smiled as she studied the hologram. The predecessors had found their own path to the stars, just as humanity was doing. They'd built a galaxy-spanning civilization based on cooperation rather than control, innovation rather than regulation. And when they'd the need for physical existence, they'd left their knowledge behind as a gift for whoever came next. On Earth, Director Elizabeth Santos sat in her office overlooking the Pacific Ocean, reading reports from across human space. The colony on New Kyoto was thriving. Trade with former Confederation species was booming. The research partnership with was producing breakthrough discoveries almost monthly. Her assistant knocked on the door. Director, we've received another formal request to join the Galactic Confederation. This one's from the collective. Santos laughed. Tell them what we've told everyone else. Thanks, but we're doing fine on our own. Actually, ma'am, this request is different. They want to join humanity's informal alliance. They're asking if they can adopt our model of voluntary cooperation. Santos paused, considering the implications. The human approach was becoming a movement, spreading across the galaxy as species discovered they didn't need external authority to thrive. Set up a meeting with their coordinators, she said finally. But make it clear, we're not looking to build another empire. We're just offering friendship to anyone who wants it. In the Confederation Council chamber, the empty chairs outnumbered the occupied ones for the first time in galactic history. Council leader flickered weakly as it addressed the remaining 23-member species. The question before us is simple, the ancient being said. Do we continue as we are, governing a shrinking alliance of worlds that stay with us out of habit rather than enthusiasm? Or do we learn from the human example and rebuild our civilization on a foundation of voluntary participation? The debate that followed would determine the future of galactic politics, but in the end, the choice was already made. The empty human chair had become a symbol of something more powerful than any government or alliance. It was a symbol of the right to choose your own path among the stars. Ambassador, now serving as an independent diplomat on Luna Station, watched the Earth turn slowly beyond her window. She'd spent the last 6 months learning about human society, and what she discovered had changed her understanding of civilization itself. Humans hadn't rejected galactic society because they were primitive or arrogant. They'd rejected it because they'd found something better. They'd built a civilization based on what people could become rather than what they'd always been. And now that civilization was spreading across the galaxy, one voluntary partnership at a time. The empty chair in the council chamber remained empty, but it was no longer a symbol of absence. It had become a reminder that true civilization couldn't be imposed from above. It had to be chosen from within, by every individual and every species, one decision at a time. Humanity had never needed the galaxy's approval, but by refusing to seek it, they'd given the galaxy something far more valuable, the freedom to choose a better way of life. The age of enforced order was ending. The age of chosen cooperation had begun.